I was standing in my kitchen, buttoning up my favorite wool coat, the camel-colored one I'd owned for 23 years, when my son David walked in and said those words that would change everything between us. "Mom, don't wear that old coat. It looks cheap. We're going to Emma's graduation party, and there will be important people there." I stopped mid-button and looked at him. David was 34 years old, dressed in his expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled. He worked in finance now, made more money in a month than I used to make in a year when I was raising him as a single mother. But standing there in my kitchen, looking at me with that expression of embarrassment and judgment, he might as well have been 14 again, ashamed to be seen with his mum. "What's wrong with my coat?" I asked, though I already knew what he was going to say. "It's old, Mum. It's from the 90s or something. People will notice. Emma's friends, her boyfriend's family, they're all successful people. I just think you should wear something more current." Emma was David's daughter, my granddaughter. She was graduating from law school that weekend, and we were going to a celebration party that evening. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. Emma and I had always been close, and I was so proud of her accomplishments. "This coat is perfectly fine," I said, continuing to button it up. "It's warm, it fits well, and there's nothing wrong with it." David sighed, that exasperated sigh I remembered from his teenage years. "Mum, please, just this once. Wear the black coat I bought you last Christmas." The black coat he'd bought me was stiff and uncomfortable, with a synthetic lining that made me sweat. It was expensive, yes, but it had no character, no history. This camel coat, on the other hand, had been with me through everything. I'd worn it to job interviews when I was struggling to support David after his father left us. I'd worn it to parent-teacher conferences, to school plays, to David's high school and college graduations. It had been my armor through the hardest years of my life. "I'm wearing this coat," I said firmly. David's face darkened. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when people stare. That's when I should have seen the warning signs. That's when I should have realized that my son had been slowly distancing himself from me for months, maybe even years. But I was focused on Emma's graduation, on celebrating her achievement. I thought David's comment about the coat was just a moment of stress, maybe nerves about the party. I was wrong. To understand how we reached that moment in my kitchen, I need to go back about 2 years to when David first started dating Clarissa. She was everything I wasn't. Young, polished, from a wealthy family. She worked in marketing for a luxury brand, wore designer clothes, and spoke with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. The first time David brought her to my house, I could see her taking inventory. Her eyes swept over my modest living room, the furniture I'd had for decades, the family photos on the mantelpiece. She was polite enough, but there was something in her expression that made me feel like I was being evaluated and found wanting. "Your home has such character," she had said, and I knew immediately that it wasn't a compliment. Over the months that followed, I noticed changes in David. He started correcting the way I spoke, suggesting I say "pardon me" instead of "excuse me," telling me that certain phrases I used were dated. When we went out to dinner, he would order wine and explain to me why it was good, as if I had never tasted wine before in my life. He started giving me gifts that weren't really gifts. They were corrections. The black coat. A handbag to replace my old one. Jewelry that was more sophisticated than what I usually wore. At first, I thought he was just trying to share his success with me. He was doing well in his career. He had money now, and I thought maybe he wanted to spoil his mother a little bit. But gradually, I realized it wasn't about spoiling me. It was about changing me. The comments became more frequent and more cutting. "Mum, you can't wear that to the restaurant. It's too casual." "Mum, Maybe you should consider updating your hairstyle. That look is very retro. Mum, when you meet Clarissa's parents, maybe don't mention that you worked at the grocery store. It might give them the wrong impression. Emma noticed it too. During one of our weekly phone calls, we talked every Tuesday evening, she brought it up. Grandma, is Dad being weird with you? He made some comment about your clothes when we had lunch last week. It seemed really rude. I tried to brush it off. He's just trying to help me look my best, sweetheart. But Emma wasn't buying it. You always look great, Grandma. And even if you didn't, it's not his place to criticize you like that. You're his mother. Emma was right, of course. But I made excuses for David. I told myself he was stressed with work, that Clarissa's family made him feel insecure, that he was just going through a phase. I had spent 34 years making excuses for the men in my life. First David's father, then David himself. It was a habit I couldn't seem to break. The real turning point came about 6 months before the coat incident at David's birthday dinner. He had chosen an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiter explains each dish like it's a work of art. Clarissa's parents were there, along with several of David's colleagues. I had dressed carefully for the evening, wearing a navy dress I'd bought for the occasion and my grandmother's pearl necklace. I thought I looked nice, appropriate for the venue. But when I arrived, I could see David's expression change. He looked disappointed, embarrassed. Throughout the dinner, he barely spoke to me. When his colleagues asked about his family, he talked about Emma's academic achievements and Clarissa's job, but he didn't mention me at all. When someone directly asked what I did for a living, David answered for me before I could speak. My mother is retired, he said quickly, then changed the subject. I wasn't retired. I was working part-time at a local bookstore and volunteering at the community centre. I had things to say, stories to tell, opinions to share. But David clearly didn't want me to share them with his friends. That night, driving home alone, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I was angry. Not just hurt, but genuinely angry. My son was ashamed of me, and I was tired of pretending it didn't matter. But even then, I told myself things would get better. Emma's graduation was coming up. It would be a family celebration, a chance for us to reconnect, to remember what was important. I was looking forward to it so much. I had no idea it would be the event that finally tore us apart completely. Emma's law school graduation was on a Saturday morning in May. The ceremony was held in a beautiful old auditorium, filled with proud families and excited graduates. I sat in the third row, having arrived early to get a good spot, wearing my camel coat because it was chilly that morning. David and Clarissa arrived just as the ceremony was beginning. David was scanning the crowd, clearly looking for me, and when he spotted me, his face fell. He walked over and sat down heavily in the seat next to me. "You wore the coat anyway," he whispered. "It's perfect for today," I whispered back. "It's cool in here." He didn't respond, but I could feel his tension radiating off him like heat. Clarissa sat on his other side, elegant in a tailored blazer and skirt. She nodded politely at me, but didn't speak. The ceremony was beautiful. When Emma's name was called, and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I felt tears of pride welling up in my eyes. I thought about all the hours we'd spent together when she was younger, reading together, helping her with homework, talking about her dreams of becoming a lawyer. She had worked so hard for this moment. After the ceremony, we gathered on the lawn outside for photos. Emma looked radiant in her cap and gown, her face glowing with achievement. She hugged me tightly when she saw me. "Grandma, I'm so glad you're here. I love your coat. It looks so classic." "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." We took photos together, Emma and I laughing about something silly she said about her mortarboard falling off. Then David approached with his camera. "Let's get some family photos," he said. We posed together, Emma in the middle, me on one side, David and Clarissa on the other. But after a few shots, David lowered his camera and looked at me with that familiar expression of frustration. "Mum, could you maybe take the coat off for a few pictures? The weather's warming up anyway." Emma looked confused. Why would she take her coat off? "It looks great. It's just for the formal photos," I thought. "Dad, leave Grandma alone about her coat. She looks beautiful." But I could see David's jaw tightening, and I didn't want to cause a scene on Emma's special day. "It's fine," I said, starting to unbutton the coat. "I don't mind." "No," Emma said firmly. "Grandma, keep your coat on. You look perfect exactly as you are." That's when Clarissa spoke up for the first time. "Maybe we could take some with the coat and some without, just to have options." It seemed like a reasonable compromise, so we took several rounds of photos. But I could tell David was still tense, still unhappy about something. I tried to push the feeling aside and focus on celebrating Emma. The party that evening was at a trendy restaurant that David had chosen. Emma had wanted something more casual, but David had insisted on this place, saying it was more appropriate for the occasion. The guest list included Emma's law school friends, her boyfriend Jeremy, Jeremy's parents, and several of David and Clarissa's friends. I arrived wearing the camel coat again. It was a cool evening, and I hadn't brought any other outerwear. David met me at the door, and I could immediately see his displeasure. "You're still wearing that coat," he said. "It's cold outside, David. What would you like me to do, Freeze? You could have brought a different jacket." "This is my jacket. This is what I own." He looked around the restaurant, taking in the other guests who were arriving. Jeremy's mother was wearing what looked like a designer coat. Clarissa's friends were all impeccably dressed. I could practically see the calculations running through his head. "Just try to keep it on," he said finally. "Don't hang it up." I stared at him. "You want me to wear my coat through the entire dinner? It's better than having everyone see how old it is when it's hanging next to theirs." That was the moment I realized my son wasn't just embarrassed by my coat. He was embarrassed by me. Everything about me. My clothes, my background, my way of speaking, my very existence in his new, polished life. I could have made a scene right then. I could have turned around and walked out. But Emma appeared at my elbow, beautiful in a simple black dress, her face bright with happiness. "Grandma, come meet Jeremy's parents. They've been so excited to meet you." So I swallowed my hurt and anger and let Emma lead me into the party. I kept my coat on, as David had requested, and spent the evening feeling like I was wrapped in shame instead of wool. But something interesting happened during that dinner. As I was talking with Jeremy's parents, his mother complimented my coat. "That's such a beautiful vintage piece," she said. "Is it from the 80s or 90s? "The 90s, I said, surprised by her genuine interest. "It's gorgeous. I love the cut and the color. You don't see quality like that anymore." "Where did you find it?" I told her I'd bought it at a department store that had since closed down, and she nodded appreciatively. "Those older pieces are so much better made than what you can buy today. I have a few vintage coats myself. There's something special about clothes that have history, don't you think?" I glanced over at David, who had overheard this conversation. His face was unreadable, but I could tell he was processing what Jeremy's mother had said. Here was someone from the same social circle he was trying so hard to impress, praising the very coat he found so embarrassing. Later in the evening, one of Emma's law school friends made a similar comment. "I love your coat. It has such a timeless style. Very Audrey Hepburn. By the end of the night, 3 different people had complimented my coat, calling it vintage, classic, timeless. Words that David would never use, but words that clearly impressed the very people he was trying to please. As we were saying our goodbyes, Emma hugged me tightly. "Thank you for being here tonight, Grandma. It meant so much to me. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, sweetheart. I'm sorry Dad was being weird about your coat. I don't know what his problem is lately." I glanced over at David, who was helping Clarissa with her designer coat. "I think your father is going through some changes. Well, I hope he changes back. I don't like this version of him." Neither did I, but I didn't say that to Emma. She didn't need to be caught in the middle of whatever was happening between David and me. Driving home that night, I replayed the evening in my mind. The compliments about my coat had been genuine, coming from people whose opinions David clearly valued. So why was he so determined to see it as something shameful? Why was he so determined to see me as something shameful? That's when I began to understand that this wasn't really about the coat at all. The coat was just a symbol. David was trying to erase his past, to create a new identity for himself that didn't include any reminders of where he came from. And I was the biggest reminder of all. I was the woman who had raised him in a small apartment, who had worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat, who had shopped at thrift stores and clipped coupons and made do with what we had. I was his history, and he wanted to rewrite that history. But I wasn't ready to be erased. The week after Emma's graduation, I barely heard from David. No thank you call for attending the party, no follow-up about how much the evening had meant to him. Nothing. It was as if, now that the formal obligations were over, he could go back to keeping me at arm's length. Emma called me on Tuesday, as she always did, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "Grandma, did you and Dad have a fight or something? He's been in a weird mood all week." "We didn't have a fight," I said, which was technically true. We hadn't fought. We had simply revealed the truth about our relationship. "Well, something's wrong, and Clarissa keeps making these comments about family dynamics and how some people need to know their place. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it doesn't sound good." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "What kind of comments?" "Just stuff about how important it is to, I don't know, present the right image." She was going on about how first impressions matter so much in professional settings, and how sometimes family members don't understand the stakes. It was really condescending. So now Clarissa was weighing in on my relationship with my son. The woman who had known David for 2 years felt qualified to judge the woman who had raised him for 34 years. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," I told Emma. "Your father and I will work things out." But I wasn't sure that was true. I wasn't even sure I wanted to work things out anymore. That weekend, I was volunteering at the community centre's weekend meal program, serving lunch to local families who needed it. It was something I'd been doing for years, and it always made me feel useful, connected to my community. I was wearing my camel coat, of course. It was a cool day, and I was going to be moving in and out of the building. I was carrying a tray of sandwiches from the kitchen when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Helen? Is that you?" I turned around to see Ruth Martinez, a woman I'd known peripherally from Emma's school events. Her grandson had been in Emma's class, and we'd served on a few committees together over the years. "Ruth, how nice to see you. Are you volunteering today?" "My daughter and I are helping with setup," she said. "I love your coat, by the way. That color is so beautiful on you." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the compliment. "It's quite old, actually. The best pieces always are. I work in fashion consulting now, you know, and I can always tell quality construction. That coat is beautifully made. The way it drapes, the attention to detail in the stitching. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore. I looked down at my coat with new eyes. Ruth was a professional in the fashion industry. If she said my coat was well made, beautifully constructed, then maybe David's assessment wasn't the only valid one. "Where did you find it?" Ruth continued. "Bellingham's," I said, naming the department store where I'd bought it in 2001. "It's been closed for years now." Oh, I remember Bellingham's. They had some wonderful pieces, very classic, timeless styles. This coat has that quality. It's not trendy, it's classic. Those are the pieces that never go out of style. We talked for a few more minutes about fashion, about quality versus trends, about how clothing could be both practical and beautiful. It was one of the most pleasant conversations I'd had in weeks. Driving home that day, I made a decision. I was tired of apologizing for who I was, for what I wore, for the life I'd lived. I was proud of the choices I'd made, the sacrifices I'd endured, the woman I'd become. If David couldn't see that, if he was determined to be embarrassed by his own mother, then that was his problem, not mine. I decided I wasn't going to change myself to make him more comfortable. I wasn't going to hide who I was to help him create his perfect new image. I was going to keep being myself, wearing my clothes, living my life, and if that caused him discomfort, so be it. The test of this resolve came sooner than I expected. The following Thursday, David called me. It was the first time he'd initiated contact since the graduation party. "Hi, Mum. How are you?" "I'm fine, David. How are you?" "Good. Listen, Clarissa and I are having a dinner party this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a few friends from work and their spouses. Would you like to join us?" I was surprised by the invitation. After weeks of distance, why was he suddenly including me in his social life? "That sounds nice," I said cautiously. "What's the occasion?" "No special occasion. Clarissa thought it would be nice to have you over. That should have been my second warning sign." David inviting me to meet his work friends was one thing, but Clarissa suggesting it? That seemed unlikely, given her previous behavior. "What should I bring?" I asked. "Nothing. Just yourself." "Oh, and Mom, it's going to be a little chilly Saturday night. Maybe wear that black coat I got you." And there it was. The real reason for the invitation. Not because they wanted my company, but because they wanted to see if I would comply with their vision of who I should be. "I'll wear whatever seems appropriate for the weather," I said. "The black coat would really be perfect for this kind of event. I'll keep that in mind." There was a pause, and I could practically hear David's frustration. "Okay. Well, 6 o'clock on Saturday. You have the address. I'll be there." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking. This dinner party was clearly a test. David and Clarissa wanted to see if I would be the kind of mother-in-law who followed their rules, who dressed according to their specifications, who played the role they had written for me. I thought about my options. I could wear the black coat, play along, try to fit into their idea of acceptable. It would probably make the evening go more smoothly. David would be pleased, Clarissa would be satisfied, and I could maintain the peace. Or I could wear my camel coat and see what happened. I knew which choice would be easier, but I also knew which choice would be honest. Saturday evening arrived cool and drizzly, perfect weather for a wool coat. I dressed carefully in a navy dress and my grandmother's pearls, did my hair nicely, and put on a light application of makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was dressed appropriately for a dinner party, a woman who had taken care with her appearance, a woman who looked perfectly respectable. Then I put on my camel coat and drove to David's house. David and Clarissa lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. They had bought it the previous year, and Clarissa had spent months decorating it with expensive furniture and artwork. It was the kind of house that appeared in home design magazines, everything perfectly coordinated and carefully chosen. I parked in the driveway behind two other cars and walked up the front steps. Through the windows, I could see people already gathered in the living room, wine glasses in hand, engaged in animated conversation. David answered the door, and I watched his face fall when he saw my coat. "Mom," he said quietly, "you're wearing the old coat." "It's perfect for tonight's weather," I replied, stepping past him into the foyer. I could see Clarissa approaching from the living room, her expression carefully controlled, but her eyes sharp. She was wearing a beautiful silk blouse and tailored pants, and her jewelry looked expensive and new. "Helen," she said, her voice warm but somehow hollow, "so glad you could make it." "Thank you for including me," I replied, starting to unbutton my coat. "Here, let me take that," David said quickly, reaching for my coat. But I had already hung it up in the front closet, next to the other guests' jackets and coats. It looked perfectly fine hanging there, neither out of place nor embarrassingly obvious. Just a woman's coat among other coats. David stared at the closet for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to hide my coat behind the others. But there were already people approaching from the living room, and he had to abandon whatever plan he might have had. "Come meet everyone," Clarissa said, leading me toward the group. The gathering was small, maybe 8 people total, including David and Clarissa. 2 couples from David's office, and another couple who were friends of Clarissa's from her marketing job. Everyone was well-dressed, polished, the kind of people who were clearly comfortable with money and success. "Everyone, this is David's mother, Helen," Clarissa announced as we entered the living room. The introductions were polite, the conversation pleasant. These were educated, articulate people, and I found myself enjoying the discussions about current events, books, travel. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed intellectual conversation with peers. One of the women, Jennifer, worked in publishing and was interested to hear about my volunteer work with the literacy program at the community center. We talked for several minutes about reading initiatives and adult education programs. "That sounds like incredibly meaningful work," she said. "How did you get involved with that?" I was about to answer when David appeared at my elbow with a fresh glass of wine. "Mom used to work in retail," he said quickly, "so she's always been interested in community service." I looked at him with surprise. That wasn't what Jennifer had asked, and it wasn't an accurate description of my work history. I had worked in retail, yes, but I had also worked as a teacher's aide, a bookkeeper, and currently as a part-time librarian. But David seemed determined to control the narrative about who I was. "Actually," I said, "I worked in several different fields over the years. Right now, I'm working part-time at Morrison's Books downtown, and I really enjoy it." Jennifer's face lit up. "Oh, I love Morrison's. It's such a wonderful independent bookstore. Do you work in any particular section?" "I help with events and book clubs mostly. We have a great mystery book club that meets monthly. I'll have to check that out. I'm always looking for a good book club." I could see David's discomfort with the direction of the conversation, but Jennifer seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked for another 10 minutes about books, about the challenges facing independent bookstores, about the importance of community spaces for readers. Dinner was served in the dining room, and I found myself seated between Jennifer and Tom, one of David's colleagues. The food was excellent. Clarissa was clearly a skilled hostess, and the conversation continued to flow easily. But I could sense David's tension throughout the meal. Every time I spoke, I could see him watching me, as if waiting for me to say something embarrassing. When Tom asked about my background, David jumped in before I could answer. "My mother has always been very community-minded," he said vaguely. When the conversation turned to travel, and I mentioned a trip I'd taken to Ireland several years ago, David quickly changed the subject. Clarissa and I are thinking about going to Italy next summer, he said, effectively redirecting the attention away from me. It was subtle, but consistent. Every time I tried to participate in the conversation as myself, as Helen, a woman with her own experiences and opinions, David worked to minimize my presence, to keep me from saying too much, to maintain control over how I was perceived. But his guests didn't seem to share his embarrassment about me. When the meal was over and we moved back to the living room, several people made a point of continuing conversations with me. Tom's wife, Sarah, asked about my volunteer work. Jennifer wanted to know more about the bookstore. Another woman, Laura, was interested in my experiences as a single mother. It must have been challenging, raising David on your own, she said. It had its difficult moments, I admitted, but it was also rewarding. David was a good kid, and I'm proud of the man he became. I glanced over at David as I said this, hoping to see some warmth in his expression, some acknowledgement of our shared history. But he was looking away, his jaw tight. As the evening progressed, I noticed that several of the guests complimented various aspects of my appearance. Laura admired my grandmother's pearls. Jennifer said she loved my hairstyle. And when it was time to leave and we were gathering our coats from the closet, Sarah made a comment that would stay with me for weeks. Helen, I have to say, I absolutely love your coat. The colour is gorgeous, and the cut is so classic. It reminds me of something Audrey Hepburn would have worn. Thank you, I said, genuinely pleased. I've had it for many years. Well, it's beautiful. You have wonderful taste. I looked over at David, who was helping Tom with his jacket. His face was stony, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Here were his colleagues and friends, the very people he was trying to impress, praising the coat he found so embarrassing. As the guests were leaving, there were more compliments, more warm goodbyes. Jennifer made me promise to email her about the book club. Laura said she hoped we'd see each other again soon. Tom shook my hand and said, "It was such a pleasure to meet you, Helen. David is lucky to have such an interesting mother." After everyone left, I helped Clarissa clear the dishes while David put away the wine glasses. The mood in the house had shifted. The pleasant energy of the evening was dissipating, replaced by something tense and uncomfortable. "Thank you for including me tonight," I said to Clarissa as we loaded the dishwasher. "Your friends are lovely people." "They seemed to really enjoy meeting you," she replied. But there was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't entirely a good thing. David appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Ready to go, Mum? I'll walk you to your car." Outside, the air was cool and damp, perfect weather for my wool coat. We walked in silence until we reached my car. "Well," I said, "that was a lovely evening. Your friends are very nice." David didn't respond immediately. He stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. "They liked you," he said finally, but he didn't sound happy about it. "Is that a problem?" He looked up at me then, and I could see something in his expression that I'd never seen before. It wasn't embarrassment or frustration. It was something deeper, more complicated. "No," he said, "it's not a problem." But I could tell he was lying. I drove home that night, feeling confused and sad. The evening had been successful by any reasonable measure. David's friends had been welcoming and kind. They had complimented my appearance, shown interest in my work, treated me with respect and warmth. If David's goal had been to introduce me to his social circle, the evening had been a complete success. So why did I feel like I had somehow failed a test I didn't even know I was taking? It would be several weeks before I understood what had really happened that night, and several more weeks before I realized that the dinner party hadn't been about including me at all. It had been about something else entirely. 3 weeks passed before I heard from David again. 3 weeks of silence, of unreturned phone calls, of excuses when I tried to make plans. Emma noticed it too. "Grandma, what's going on with Dad? He won't talk about you, and every time I bring up family dinner or suggest we all get together, he changes the subject. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe he's just busy with work." But I did know, or at least I was beginning to understand. The dinner party hadn't been about including me in David's life. It had been about testing whether I could be managed, controlled, shaped into the kind of mother who would enhance rather than threaten his new image. And I had failed that test by being myself. The truth came out on a Thursday afternoon when I was working at the bookstore. I was helping a customer find a cookbook when my phone rang. It was Emma, and she sounded upset. "Grandma, can you talk?" "I'm in my car outside Dad's office." "Of course. What's wrong?" "I just had lunch with Dad and Clarissa. I think they're trying to cut you out of the family." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "They were talking about Thanksgiving, and when I asked if you were coming to their house like usual, Dad got all weird and said they were thinking about doing something smaller this year. Just the three of us. Thanksgiving had been at David's house for the past 5 years, ever since he'd bought his first apartment large enough to host. It was our tradition, our way of staying connected as a family. "Maybe they just want a quiet holiday this year," I said, though I didn't believe it. "No, Grandma, it's not that. They were talking about—" I don't know how to say this without sounding awful. Just say it, sweetheart. "They were talking about how sometimes it's better to limit family gatherings to people who fit in." Clarissa said something about how different generations have different social expectations, and how sometimes it's kinder to everyone involved to maintain appropriate boundaries. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "They said this in front of you? They think I agree with them. They think because I'm successful, because I have my law degree and I'm dating Jeremy, that I'm embarrassed by you too." "But I'm not, Grandma. I'm embarrassed by them." I sat down heavily in the chair behind the bookstore counter. So this was it. This was David's solution to the problem of having a mother who didn't fit his image. Not to change his perspective, but to eliminate the source of his discomfort. "There's more," Emma continued. "Clarissa was talking about how important it is for David's career that he maintains the right kind of social connections. She said something about how family members who don't understand professional expectations can sometimes be— what was her word? Limiting. I see. No, you don't see, because it's insane. Grandma, you raised Dad by yourself. You worked multiple jobs to put him through college. You sacrificed everything for him. And now he's going to exclude you from family holidays because you don't meet Clarissa's standards?" I could hear the anger in Emma's voice, the outrage on my behalf. Part of me was grateful for her loyalty, but another part of me was sad that she had to witness this ugliness in her father. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need to think." "Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell Dad exactly what I think of his plan." "Emma, don't. This is between your father and me. You shouldn't be put in the middle." "I'm not in the middle, Grandma. I'm on your side." After Emma hung up, I sat alone in the bookstore, trying to process what I'd learned. David and Clarissa were planning to phase me out of family gatherings, to create a smaller, more manageable family unit that fit their social aspirations. They were going to make me a part-time relative, someone who could be included when convenient and excluded when my presence might be awkward. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting David first, making sacrifices for his future, working extra shifts to pay for his school clothes, his books, his college tuition. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up helping him with homework, the weekends I'd spent driving him to activities and friends' houses, the dreams I'd deferred so he could pursue his. And now he was repaying that devotion by deciding I wasn't good enough to be included in his life. That evening, I called my sister Joyce in Portland. Joyce was 5 years older than me, and we'd grown closer since our mother's death 3 years earlier. She had always been direct, sometimes brutally honest, but I needed someone who would tell me the truth. Joyce, I need to talk to you about David. What's that boy done now? I told her everything. The coat incident, the dinner party, the conversation Emma had overheard. Joyce listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When I finished, there was a long silence. Helen, she said finally, I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. Go ahead. David's been heading in this direction for years. Ever since he started making money, he's been different. Remember last Christmas when he corrected you about which fork to use at dinner? Remember when he helped you choose a new purse because your old one was dated? I did remember. I had tried to see those incidents as David caring about me, wanting to help me fit into his world. But Joyce saw them differently. He's been training you, Helen. Training you to be the kind of mother he thinks he needs. And when you wouldn't stay trained, when you kept being yourself, he decided to find a different solution. But he's my son, Joyce. I raised him. I love him. I know you do. And maybe he loves you too, in his way. But he loves his new life more. And he's decided you don't fit into that life. What should I do? That depends. Do you want to keep trying to become the woman David wants you to be? Or do you want to stay the woman you are? I knew the answer to that question, but it was painful to say it out loud. I want to stay who I am. Then you're going to have to accept that David might choose his image over his family. And you're going to have to decide if you're willing to fight for your place in his life, or if you're going to step back and let him make his choice. After I hung up with Joyce, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my kitchen, looking out at the small garden I'd been tending for 15 years. The flowers were blooming despite the cool weather, bright and defiant against the grey sky. I thought about the woman I had been at 30, newly divorced, scared but determined to build a good life for my son and myself. That woman wouldn't have tolerated being dismissed or diminished by anyone, including her own child. That woman would have fought back. Where had she gone? When had I become someone who apologized for her clothes, her background, her very existence? I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to disappear quietly from David's life. I wasn't going to make it easy for him to erase me. If he wanted to exclude me from family gatherings, he was going to have to tell me himself, to my face. He was going to have to own his choice instead of hiding behind Clarissa's social expectations. And I was going to make sure Emma knew that she always had a home with me, no matter what happened between her father and me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. David called me the following Sunday morning. His voice was carefully neutral, the tone he probably used with difficult clients at work. Hi, Mum. How are you? I'm fine, David. How are you? Good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving. Here it comes, I thought. What about Thanksgiving? Clarissa and I have been talking, and we think it might be nice to try something different this year. More intimate. Just the three of us. Me, Clarissa, and Emma. I see. And where does that leave me? There was a pause. Well, you could always do something with Joyce. Didn't you say she was thinking about visiting? I felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time I didn't try to suppress it. David, are you uninviting me from Thanksgiving? It's not that I'm uninviting you, Mum. It's just that we want to try a smaller gathering this year. A smaller gathering that doesn't include your mother. Another pause. It's not personal, Mom. How is excluding me from a family holiday not personal? It's just, Look, Clarissa has some colleagues who might join us, and we thought it would be easier. Easier if I wasn't there. Easier for everyone. I took a deep breath. This was my moment of truth. I could accept this gracefully, make it easy for David, maintain the peace. Or I could fight for my place in my own family. David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Are you ashamed of me? Mom, that's not. Are you ashamed of your mother? Yes or no? The silence stretched between us, and in that silence, I heard my answer. I'm not ashamed of you, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. I just think that sometimes there can be compatibility issues. Compatibility issues. Different backgrounds, different social expectations. It doesn't mean anyone is better or worse, just that sometimes it's easier when everyone is compatible. I see. And I'm not compatible with your life. It's not that simple, Mum. It seems pretty simple to me. You're embarrassed by your mother, so you're excluding me from family events. Is that about right? Mum, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it has to be? David, you're cutting me out of the family, and you want me to make it easy for you. I'm not cutting you out of the family. We can still see each other. Just maybe not at big social events. What social events? Thanksgiving dinner? Christmas morning? Emma's birthday parties? We can work something out. Maybe we can have separate celebrations. You and Emma could have your own traditions. I felt something cold settle in my chest. David wasn't just excluding me from one holiday. He was proposing a permanent arrangement where I existed on the periphery of my own family, included only when my presence wouldn't inconvenience his social aspirations. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said. You want to have two separate family units, one that includes you, Clarissa, and Emma for public occasions, and another one that includes me and Emma for private occasions that won't interfere with your image. I wouldn't put it like that. How would you put it? I would say that we're trying to find an arrangement that works for everyone. It doesn't work for me, David. Mum, please try to understand. This isn't about you personally. It's about what's best for everyone involved. What's best for everyone involved is keeping families together. What's best is loyalty and love and respect. What's best is not throwing away 34 years of history because you're embarrassed by where you came from. I'm not embarrassed by where I came from. Yes, you are. You're embarrassed by me, by my clothes, by my job, by my apartment, by everything about me that reminds you of the life we used to have. You want to pretend that you sprung fully formed into the world as a successful businessman with a perfect girlfriend and no messy history. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you told one of your colleagues about the years I worked 3 jobs to pay for your college? When was the last time you mentioned that I was the one who helped you with your homework every night, who drove you to every soccer practice, who sat up with you when you were sick? David didn't answer. When was the last time you introduced me as your mother, without immediately explaining away who I am, or what I do, or where I live? Still no answer. You know what, David? I raised you to be better than this. I raised you to value people for their character, not their clothes. I raised you to be loyal and kind and grateful. I apparently failed. Mom, please? No. You made your choice. You chose your image over your family. You chose Clarissa's approval over your mother's love. You chose to be the kind of man who throws away the people who helped him become who he is. It doesn't have to be like this. Yes, it does. Because I'm not going to accept your plan. I'm not going to quietly disappear into the background so you can have your perfect life. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not so you can feel more comfortable. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to exclude me from your life, You're going to have to live with the consequences. And one of those consequences is that Emma is going to know exactly why her grandmother isn't at family gatherings anymore. Don't drag Emma into this. I'm not dragging Emma into anything. You dragged her into it when you decided to restructure the family to suit your social needs. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to have my own Thanksgiving dinner this year. A beautiful dinner with anyone who wants to join me. And Emma is invited. And if she chooses to come to my dinner instead of yours, well, that's her choice to make. Mum, you're being unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable. David, listen to yourself. You called your mother to uninvite her from Thanksgiving, and I'm the one being unreasonable? There was another long silence. I have to go, David said finally. Yes, I said. I think you do. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, shaking with adrenaline and grief. I had just had the worst conversation of my life with my only child, and I wasn't sure our relationship would survive it. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pride. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to accept David's plan to diminish my role in the family. I had fought back. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Emma. Grandma, Dad just called me. He's really upset. He said you two had a fight about Thanksgiving. We had a conversation about Thanksgiving, yes. He said you're planning your own dinner, and you invited me. You're always invited to my home, Emma. You know that. He made it sound like you're trying to force me to choose between you and him. I closed my eyes. This was what I had been afraid of, what I had tried to avoid. Emma caught in the middle of her father's choices and my response to them. Sweetheart, I would never put you in that position. Whatever happens between your father and me, you should feel free to make your own decisions about how you want to spend your time. But you are having your own Thanksgiving dinner? Yes, I am. Good. Because I want to come. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Grandma, what Dad is doing is wrong. He's choosing his girlfriend's social climbing over his own mother, and I'm not going to be part of that. What about your father? You two have a good relationship. We did. But I don't know who this person is anymore. The dad I grew up with would never treat you like this. This version of him, I don't like this version of him. That night, Emma came over to my apartment. We sat in my small living room, eating takeout Chinese food and planning Thanksgiving dinner. It was the most time we'd spent together in months, and I realized how much I'd missed her company. I want to invite Jeremy, she said. Is that okay? Of course. And maybe Jeremy's parents, if they don't have plans. They really liked you at the graduation party. That would be lovely. What about Joyce? Is she still thinking about visiting? I'll call her tonight. As we planned the menu and made a guest list, I felt something I hadn't expected. Excitement. For months, I had been focused on trying to fit into David's vision of our family. Now, for the first time in a long time, I was creating something of my own. Grandma, Emma said as she was getting ready to leave, I'm proud of you for standing up to Dad. I don't know if it was the right thing to do. It was absolutely the right thing to do. You deserve better than what he was offering you. After Emma left, I called Joyce and told her about the day's events. Well, she said when I finished, it sounds like you found your backbone again. I hope I didn't just destroy my relationship with my son. Helen, your son was already destroying his relationship with you. You just refused to let him do it quietly. So what happens now? Now you have your own Thanksgiving dinner. You surround yourself with people who love and appreciate you. And you let David decide whether his pride is more important than his family. I spent the next few weeks preparing for what I was calling my Thanksgiving. I invited Joyce, who was thrilled to have an excuse to visit. I invited Jeremy's parents, who accepted enthusiastically. I invited Ruth Martinez from the community center and Jennifer from David's dinner party, who was excited to attend after I mentioned Emma would be there with her book recommendations. As the guest list grew, I realized I was creating exactly the kind of gathering I had always wanted: warm, inclusive, focused on gratitude and connection rather than image and status. 2 days before Thanksgiving, David called again. "Mum, I've been thinking about our conversation. Have you? I don't want to fight with you. Maybe we can work something out." I waited for him to continue. "What if you came to our dinner after all? Just, maybe you could wear the black coat?" I almost laughed. After everything we'd said to each other, after all the hurt and anger, David's solution was for me to show up in the coat he'd bought me. "David, do you understand why we fought?" "We fought because of a misunderstanding about Thanksgiving plans. We fought because you're ashamed of me and you want to exclude me from your life." "I'm not ashamed of you, Mom. I just think that sometimes it helps if people make an effort to fit in. And by people, you mean me. I mean everyone should make an effort. When was the last time you asked Clarissa to make an effort to fit into my life? When was the last time she visited my apartment, or came to one of my community center events, or tried to understand my world?" David didn't answer. The effort only goes one way, doesn't it? I'm supposed to change myself to fit into your life, but no one in your life is expected to accommodate me. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? David, answer me honestly. If I showed up to your Thanksgiving dinner in my camel coat, what would happen? Another silence. You'd be embarrassed. You'd spend the whole evening worried about what people were thinking about your mother's old coat. You'd probably make some comment about how I'm set in my ways or how I have my own sense of style. You'd apologize for me without actually apologizing. I wouldn't. Yes, you would. Because that's what you've been doing for months. Apologizing for me, explaining me away, managing other people's impressions of me. I just want everyone to be comfortable. Everyone except me. David sighed, that same exasperated sigh from my kitchen weeks earlier. What do you want from me, Mum? I want you to be proud of me. I want you to introduce me to your friends as the woman who raised you, not as someone who needs to be managed or contained. I want you to remember that I'm your mother, not a social liability. I am proud of you. Then act like it. Stop trying to change me. Stop making excuses for me. Stop treating me like an embarrassment. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You choose to be embarrassed by me, David. No one is making you feel that way. You're choosing to see me as a problem instead of as your mother. There was a long pause, and when David spoke again, his voice was different. Tired. I don't know how to do this, Mom. I don't know how to be successful and still be who I used to be. For the first time in months, I heard vulnerability in my son's voice. Not frustration or embarrassment, but genuine uncertainty. You don't have to choose between success and authenticity, David. You can be proud of where you came from and still build the life you want. But what if people judge me? What if they think less of me because of our background? Then they're not the kind of people whose opinions should matter to you. But they do matter, Mum. In business, in social situations, these things matter. Some things matter more. Like what? Like family. Like loyalty. Like remembering the people who loved you before you had money or status. David was quiet for a long time. I don't think I can do what you want me to do, he said finally. What do you think I want you to do? I think you want me to go back to being the person I was before, to give up the life I've built. I don't want you to give up anything, David. I want you to add to it. I want you to include your history and your future, not erase it. I don't know how to do that. You start by stopping the behavior that hurts people who love you. You stop trying to change me. You stop making excuses for me. You introduce me as your mother, and let that be enough. And if people judge me for that, then you learn who your real friends are. Another long silence. I need to think about this, David said. Take all the time you need. But David, while you're thinking, remember that Emma is watching. She's learning from you about what family means, about how you treat the people who sacrifice for you. Do you want to teach her that success means abandoning the people who helped you achieve it? I don't want to teach her that. Then maybe you need to think about what you do want to teach her. After David hung up, I felt emotionally drained, but somehow hopeful. For the first time in our conversation, David had admitted uncertainty instead of defensiveness. He had acknowledged that he was struggling with how to balance his new life with his old one. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a promise to change, but it was the first honest thing he'd said to me in months. Thanksgiving Day arrived grey and chilly, perfect weather for a wool coat. I dressed carefully in a burgundy dress that I'd always loved, put on my grandmother's pearls, and wrapped myself in my camel coat. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who was dressed appropriately for a holiday dinner, a woman who had taken care with her appearance, a woman who looked perfectly respectable. More importantly, I saw myself. My guests began arriving at noon. Joyce came first, carrying a bottle of wine and a pumpkin pie from the bakery she'd discovered near her hotel. Jeremy and his parents arrived next, bearing flowers and enthusiastic compliments about my apartment. Ruth brought homemade rolls, and Jennifer contributed a beautiful salad and stories about her latest book club selections. As we gathered in my small living room for pre-dinner drinks, I looked around at the faces of people who had chosen to spend their holiday with me. Not because they had to, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to be there. I want to thank everyone for being here today, I said, raising my glass of wine. This isn't the Thanksgiving I planned to have this year, but it's turning out to be exactly the Thanksgiving I needed. The dinner was beautiful. The turkey was perfectly cooked. The sides were delicious. And the conversation flowed easily among people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Emma sat next to me, regaling Jeremy's parents with stories about her new job at a legal aid clinic. Joyce entertained everyone with tales from her recent travels. Jennifer and Ruth discovered they had mutual friends in the literary community. It was the kind of gathering where everyone felt comfortable, where no one had to perform or pretend or worry about making the right impression. It was warm and inclusive, and real in a way that I hadn't experienced in a long time. As we were clearing the dinner dishes, Emma pulled me aside. "Grandma, this is the best Thanksgiving we've had in years. I'm so glad you're here, sweetheart. I wouldn't be anywhere else." "And Grandma? Dad doesn't know what he's missing." Just then, the doorbell rang. Emma and I looked at each other with confusion. Everyone who was expected was already here. I opened the door to find David standing on my doorstep, holding a bottle of wine and looking uncertain. "Hi, Mum. I hope I'm not too late." I stared at him for a moment, taking in his appearance. He was wearing the expensive suit he always wore to formal occasions, but his tie was slightly askew, and his hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. "David, what are you doing here?" "I was having dinner at our house, and I kept thinking about what you said, about Emma watching, about what I was teaching her." He paused, looking past me into the apartment where he could hear the sound of laughter and conversation. I realized I was teaching her that it's okay to abandon people when they become inconvenient. And that's not who I want to be. Emma appeared beside me. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize to your grandmother, and to ask if there's room for one more at dinner." I stepped back from the doorway. "There's always room at my table for my son. As David entered my apartment, I could see him taking in the scene. My small but warmly decorated living room, filled with people enjoying each other's company, the dining room table still set with my good china and the remnants of a clearly successful meal, the general atmosphere of contentment and celebration. "Everyone, this is my son David," I said, leading him into the living room. The introductions were warm but slightly awkward. David knew Jeremy, of course, and he'd met Jeremy's parents at Emma's graduation. Joyce greeted him with the cool politeness that suggested she hadn't forgotten our recent phone conversation about his behavior. Jennifer and Ruth were gracious, welcoming him as they would any unexpected guest. We found David a chair and brought him a plate of food. He ate quietly while the conversation resumed around him, and I could see him observing the dynamic of the group, the easy way people interacted, the genuine warmth that filled the room. After dinner, as we were having coffee and pie in the living room, Jennifer made a comment that stopped all conversation. "Helen, I have to tell you again how much I love your coat. That camel color is just gorgeous on you." David looked up from his pie, his expression unreadable. "It really is beautiful," Ruth added. "Such classic styling. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore." "Thank you," I said, glancing at David. "It's been a faithful companion for many years." "There's something about vintage pieces," Jeremy's mother said. "They have character that you just can't find in modern clothes. That coat looks like it has stories." "It does have stories," Emma said, smiling at me. "Grandma's worn that coat to every important event in our family for as long as I can remember. My school plays, graduations, birthdays. It's like a family heirloom." I watched David's face as Emma spoke, saw something shift in his expression. For the first time, he was hearing other people describe my coat not as an embarrassment, but as something with value, with history, with meaning. Later, as the evening was winding down and guests were beginning to leave, David helped me carry dishes to the kitchen. "Mum, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That coat. You really love it, don't you?" I looked at him, trying to read his expression. "Yes, I do. It's been through everything with me. It's comfortable, it's well made, and it has sentimental value." I never thought about it that way. What way? As something with sentimental value. I only saw it as old. A lot of things that are old have value, David. Sometimes more value than new things. He nodded slowly. Like family relationships. Like family relationships. We worked in silence for a few minutes, loading the dishwasher, putting away leftovers. "Mum, I owe you an apology." I waited for him to continue. "I've been acting like someone I don't recognize, someone I don't like very much. I got so caught up in trying to fit into this new world that I forgot about the world I came from. I forgot about you. You didn't forget about me, David. You just decided I didn't fit into your new life. You're right. And I was wrong. You fit into any life I have because you're my mother. You're the person who made my life possible." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I've missed you, son. I've missed the relationship we used to have. I've missed it too. And I want it back, if you'll let me try." "What about Clarissa?" David's jaw tightened slightly. "Clarissa and I are going to have some conversations about what family means to me. And if she can't accept that you're an important part of my life, then maybe she's not the right person for me. David, I don't want to come between you and someone you care about. You're not coming between us, Mom." "She is. She's the one who's been pushing for you to be excluded, who's been making comments about your clothes and your background. I went along with it because I was weak. I was so desperate to be accepted in her world that I was willing to sacrifice my relationship with you. And now? Now I realize that anyone who would ask me to choose between them and my mother isn't someone I want in my life. We finished cleaning up the kitchen and returned to the living room, where the remaining guests were getting ready to leave. As Joyce was putting on her coat, she pulled David aside. "I'm glad you came tonight," she said quietly. "Your mother needed to see that you still remembered who you are." "I almost forgot," David replied, "but she reminded me." After everyone left, David, Emma, and I sat in my living room, talking late into the night. We talked about the past, about the years when it was just David and me against the world. We talked about the present, about the mistakes we'd all made, and the hurt we'd caused each other. And we talked about the future, about how we wanted our family to look going forward. "I want you at Christmas dinner," David said. "At my house, with all my friends, wearing whatever coat you want to wear. I'd like that. And I want to start coming to some of your community center events. I want to understand that part of your life better." "I'd like that too." Emma fell asleep on my couch around midnight, curled up like she used to when she was small. David covered her with a throw blanket and sat back down. "She's incredible," he said, watching her sleep. "And she gets that strength from you. She gets it from both of us, from our family. I almost threw that away. But you didn't. You came back." David smiled, and for the first time in months, it was the smile I remembered from his childhood. "I like your coat, by the way," he said. "It suits you." "Thank you, son. That means everything to me." The weeks following Thanksgiving brought changes I never could have anticipated. David kept his word about having conversations with Clarissa, and those conversations apparently didn't go well. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, he called to tell me they had broken up. "She couldn't understand why I wanted to include you in more family events," he said. "She kept talking about maintaining appropriate boundaries and professional image. When I told her that you were more important to me than anyone's opinion of my professional image, she said I was making a mistake that would hurt my career." "I'm sorry, David. I know you cared about her. I thought I did. But I realized I cared more about what she represented than about who she actually was. She represented this life I thought I wanted, this perfect image I thought I needed to maintain. But that life required me to pretend you didn't exist, and I can't do that anymore." David started coming to my apartment for dinner once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. We would cook together, talking about our weeks, our work, our thoughts about books we'd both read. It was comfortable and easy, in a way our relationship hadn't been in years. He also started attending some of my community center events. The first time he showed up at the monthly book club meeting, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual expensive suits, several of the other members were surprised to meet my son. "You didn't tell us your son was so handsome," Ruth said afterward, making David blush. "You didn't tell us he was so well-read either," added another member. He had some excellent insights about the novel we discussed. David began to see a different side of my life, the community I'd built, the friendships I'd formed, the meaningful work I was doing. And I began to see him relax in ways I hadn't witnessed since his childhood, freed from the constant pressure to perform and impress. Christmas that year was exactly what David had promised: a dinner at his house with all his friends, and me wearing my camel coat. But the dynamic was completely different from previous gatherings. Instead of trying to manage or minimize my presence, David actively included me in conversations, shared stories about our family history, and clearly took pride in introducing me as his mother. "Your mum is delightful," Tom from his office told him during the evening. "She has such interesting perspectives on current events." "She raised me to think critically about everything," David replied. "I'm lucky to have her as a mother." I caught his eye across the room and smiled. This was the son I remembered, the boy I'd raised to value people over appearances, substance over style. Emma noticed the change too. "It's like Dad remembered who he used to be," she said during one of our Tuesday phone calls. He's so much more relaxed now, so much more himself. People sometimes lose their way, I told her. The important thing is that they find their way back. As spring arrived, I decided to make a change of my own. I had been working part-time at the bookstore and volunteering at the community centre, but I realized I wanted to do something more ambitious with my time. I had experience, wisdom, and energy, and I wanted to put them to better use. I applied for a position as program coordinator at a non-profit organization that provided job training and life skills classes to adults who were trying to get back on their feet. It was exactly the kind of work I'd always been passionate about, and when they offered me the position, I accepted immediately. "I'm so proud of you, Mum," David said when I told him about the new job. "This sounds perfect for you. It feels right. It feels like the next chapter." "What will you wear on your first day?" he asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "My camel coat, of course. It's perfect for new beginnings." My first day at the non-profit was in early April, cool and slightly rainy. I put on my favourite coat and drove to the office feeling excited and nervous in equal measure. The work was challenging and rewarding, involving everything from curriculum development to one-on-one mentoring to grant writing. During my first week, I was working with a young woman named Tracy, who was trying to get her GED while managing 2 part-time jobs and caring for her elderly mother. She reminded me of myself at 30, determined but overwhelmed, doing everything she could to build a better life despite difficult circumstances. "I don't know if I can do this," she said during our second session together. "Everything feels so hard right now." "I know it feels hard," I said. "But hard doesn't mean impossible. Sometimes the most worthwhile things require us to push through when everything seems difficult." "How do you know?" "Because I've been where you are. I was a single mother working multiple jobs, trying to give my son opportunities I'd never had. There were many times when I wanted to give up. But I kept going, one day at a time, and eventually things got better." "What kept you going?" I thought about her question, about all the years of struggle and sacrifice and hope. "Love," I said finally. "Love for my son. Love for the future I was trying to build. Love for the woman I was becoming through the process of not giving up." Tracy smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "I think I can love myself enough to keep going." "I know you can." That evening, David came over for our weekly dinner. As I was telling him about my first week at the new job, about Tracy and the other clients I was working with, I could see pride in his expression. "You know what, Mum? You're inspiring." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've built a life that matters. You help people. You make a difference. You stay connected to what's important. I spent so much time trying to distance myself from who you are, when I should have been trying to become more like you. You are like me, David. You just forgot for a while." I'm remembering now. That weekend, David surprised me by showing up at my apartment with a shopping bag. "I have something for you," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "What is it?" He pulled out a beautiful scarf, deep burgundy wool, with subtle gold threads running through it. "I thought this would look nice with your camel coat," he said. "I know how much that coat means to you, and I wanted to give you something that would complement it instead of trying to replace it.